All right, folks, welcome back to Dirty Boots Capital. I am your host, Tony Lopes, and today we have an amazing young man here doing great things. His name is Nick Aufenkamp, and he's the founder of a DIY Homebuyer Academy. A lot of folks out there are trying to figure out how to buy a home and how to do it efficiently, quickly, the whole bit. So I figured having Nick on to talk about this DIY Homebuyer Academy that he founded, I just thought would be of great value. So Nick, welcome to Dirty Boots Capital.
Hey, Tony, thanks so much. I love the show, love the guests that you've had on. So I'm really honored to be here and to be able to share a bit with your audience.
Yeah, so let's kick it off. Let's talk about what is this DIY Home Buyer Academy? Why did you feel you had to start this academy?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So, in a nutshell, the DIY Homebuyer Academy is teaching people, home buyers, how to purchase a home without using a buyer's agent. And the inspiration for starting this business and service came out of my own experience working as a real estate agent. I got into real estate because I was purchasing investment properties. I saw how much I was paying to my buyer's agent. I mean, sure, it looked like a seller credit, but that money had to come from somewhere. And after buying a few properties, I thought, man, I really need to learn how to represent myself. Well, like a dummy, I didn't realize that I could just represent myself. So I went ahead and got my full real estate license to start buying properties. And I figured, hey, since I have my license, I might as well help people buy and sell homes. But as I was working with home buyers, most of my clientele were highly competent people. They were investors themselves or business owners. And I just started to realize, man, these folks could totally do this job without me as their agent if they just had a little bit of guidance. And I started to lose sleep at night just thinking like, man, on some of these deals, I'm getting paid $25,000. And I don't know. It's a scary thing to admit, but it's like I don't know that I'm actually bringing $25,000 of value to this transaction. And I want to be somebody that brings more value to the world than I extract. And so I just started to think like, man, if I could teach people how to do this themselves, that's something that would help me sleep better at night. And I think something that would benefit home buyers all over the United States.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's the industry itself or society where we're going. I don't know where it's essentially coming from. I know the industry itself makes it seem more complicated than it is, and so that puts a lot of pressure on us to say, "Oh, gee, I need to go hire an expert. I need to go hire a buyer's agent." A lot of that. I mean, is that what you see as well? I mean, in terms of the pressure put on us to go hire somebody?
Yeah, it's a conglomeration of factors, really. Some of it's just like for the last 40 years, the standard way of buying a home has been that you hire a buyer's agent. And the National Association of Realtors and Brokerages have been really savvy in the way that they have pitched that service because they've made it sound like for decades it's a free service because it's paid for by the seller. So it's like, well, you might as well have a buyer's agent because you're not saving any money to not have one. The seller's already offering to pay them. And so buyers weren't really having to think about the compensation that was going to their agent. It's like free service, might as well use it. Well, all of that changed on August 17th of this year with the NAR settlement and new rules that came out of that, where now buyer's agents have to have a conversation about compensation before they're even allowed to show a home. And so now buyers all over the United States are waking up to, holy smokes, my agent's getting paid $18,000. Do I really think they're worth that? And it's just creating the conversation where now folks are asking, okay, is there another way to purchase real estate without a buyer's agent? So that's a little bit of the background and kind of why I think right now is the moment for a big change in the industry.
Yeah, and you and I both know it's not free to the buyer. I've bought property from sellers without an agent, and because they weren't going to pay that sales commission to an agent, we were able to negotiate a lower price, which resulted
Yeah.
in a in savings to me. Because to your point, that cost needs to be covered somehow, and that cost is covered by the price of the property being somewhat higher, whatever the
Correct.
seller feels like it can be. But I bought a couple of properties without agents, and we've been able to negotiate a better price. It worked for the seller, it worked for the buyer, and all worked out well. My next question is relative to so this works for like standard home buyers, single people, married people going off buying a home for the first time or maybe the second time. Great. But what about like investors, people who want to get into single family investing or maybe Airbnbs or anything like that? Does your program, your academy help them in the same way?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And actually, I think that becoming a DIY home buyer is the most financially advantageous for investors because the savings that you have by learning how to handle the transaction yourself, just like you're saying, Tony, it compounds because that means every subsequent property that you buy, you're saving that 2.5, 3% that is not going to a buyer's agent. So you're able to leverage that for your own financial benefits in a number of different ways. Plus, you get to know the real estate process a whole lot better. When you take control of the home buying process, you learn a lot more about the ins and outs. You learn how to be strategic with your contingencies. Because you have more direct access to the seller or to the seller's agent, you can really understand what the seller's motivations and pain points are and tailor your offer and negotiation strategy to that without having to have another person, your buyer's agent, that's acting as another middleman. And it kind of becomes this game of telephone where you're talking to your
Yeah.
buyer's agent, the buyer's agent's talking to the listing agent's talking to the seller, and then it has to go back through the chain the other way. And you never really know in that situation if your exact desires are being communicated the way that you want them to be. So, as an investor, I do think that it's really, really beneficial to learn how to handle the buy side of the process entirely on your own. And kind of going back to your earlier question of just like, well, for a lot of people, they have it in their mind that it's this really scary, difficult, complicated thing. It's a weighty process because you are talking about potentially tens of thousands of dollars in earnest money that you could lose if you don't adhere to your contractual deadlines. And it's obviously you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, on a property. So it's appropriate to feel the weightiness of that. But at the same time, real estate is something that we've been transacting since the dawn of time. It's like civilization has figured this out over a few thousand years. And so it's not rocket science, it's not heart surgery. And so, with a bit of education and guidance, investors can totally handle this process on their own.
Yeah, so a couple of things you bring to the forefront of my mind. I did a podcast yesterday with somebody else, and we were talking about something very similar. About it's very difficult the first time you do something like this on your own, but once you get through that threshold and you're on the other side of it, you look back and you say, "Gee, that wasn't so bad."
Right.
So I
Right.
think it's just a matter of working with somebody who's done it, somebody who's smart, who can walk you through. You get through to the other side, and now it's like, what was I worried about? It wasn't that bad. I truly believe that we need to keep that dynamic in check and say, hey, this isn't going to be as bad as all the fictitious things we're dreaming up and all the boogeyman we're putting in our brain on how hard this is going to be. It really isn't. The second thing I wanted to share, because you're so right in terms of the closer you are to the seller, the better you understand the deal. You
Mhm.
understand how you can close the deal. And I'll give an example, that a true case that happened with me. I didn't have an agent. I was actually working directly with the seller's agent. The seller had an agent. I saw this property listed. I picked up the phone. I called the seller's agent. I said, hey, I'm interested. We get into talking. I put in an offer. We're working through things. It wasn't as high as she wanted it to be, but that's okay. But one of her things that came out in the conversation, maybe I would have never heard this if I had my own buyer's agent. One of the things
Mm.
that came out was in that particular city, there's a requirement for all multifamily buildings to have a certificate of compliance. They
Hmm.
actually have city building inspectors that every 3 years go into the building, make sure it's compliant, it has smoke detectors and proper ventilation of heaters and things like that, right? So she didn't have it. It had expired, and she was really worried that she did not have that inspection certificate to go
Yeah.
along with the sale. And for me, knowing I could navigate through that, I knew inspectors, I knew I could get this after the fact. Granted, it was going to cost me more. I think it was a difference of like if she had filed for it, it would have cost her like $300. Me having to file for it as a new building owner, it was going to cost me like $800. So it was a cost there. But in terms of getting the building to close, that was her worry bead, that
Yeah.
I needed to make her feel better and say, "Don't worry about that. I'll take
Yeah.
care of that. Let's just get this to close. I'll take care of that piece. Just remove that from her psyche, from her not being able to sleep at night, because it was going to come up again and again, no matter who was buying the building. I just needed her to see that she was very lucky to have me standing in front of her saying, "Don't worry about it, I'll take care of it." And so there was value. There was more than $800 worth of value, let me tell you, in being able to bring that. I only understood that because I was the one standing in front of her and her agent. I
Right.
didn't have a buyer's agent. So that's a real life example of what actually happens here. And I have other scenarios that I could share, but it does happen. I want to share to the viewers, to the listeners, what you bring up is actual fact. The closer you can
Yeah.
be to the seller, the better.
And it's amazing how common those kind of stories are, where it's like you would think that a deal that's an issue that's maybe a few $100s in total wouldn't be that big of a thing for the seller. But the seller is not just concerned about how much money they're taking away. They've got a million other concerns. They've got timelines that they're worried about. They've got their next property that they're lining up. And so
Yeah.
the convenience factor of you being able to identify that exact pain point for them and be able to take that away from them, while, yeah, it's maybe an extra $800 for you, that could be worth $5,000 or more to that buyer or to that seller. And so that's amazing that because you were able to have that conversation, you were able to pull that out. And you're right to mention that with a buyer's agent, you just don't know. I mean, buyer's agents, one, they're not all built the same, even though industry wide they kind of get paid the same amount. They have their own sort of insurance kind of issues that they've got to worry about, liabilities. And so they don't want to create any issues that's going to make for a more bumpy, rocky transaction. So a buyer's agent could hear about an issue like that with that missing certificate and be like, "Oh, this could blow up the deal." And so by you removing that piece, you actually bring more efficiency to the whole home buying process, which I think is a really amazing benefit to any home buyer, whether you're an investor or just looking for your primary residence.
And again, I want to, so to speak, harp, so to speak, on something you just said. So you live in this world, you say these things, and I mean, I want to bring it forward because it's super important to highlight. You said it, but I want to make sure folks understand it. Not all buyers agents are created equal. I've experienced that. I bet, Nick, you experienced that.
Yeah,
I've had buyer's agents who have been great, and I'm not here to kick anybody in the teeth,
of
but I've been in
course.
real estate for 20 years, over 20 years. And so I've had agents who basically said, "Oh, the documents are online, just go search for them." If I'm searching for the documents, what do I need you for? Right?
Right.
And just other things like that. Not really understanding inspections. Should we do a
Yeah.
pest inspection? Oh, gee, I don't know. What do you feel like? No, I'm asking you as the agent, what is the generally accepted method to go about doing this home inspection? Should we do a mold inspection, a pest inspection, a building inspection, a septic inspection? Like, what's going to get us over the goal line to close on this property without alienating the seller? And
Mhm.
I just felt like I was asking questions that I thought were reasonable, and the agent was just and they were seasons. I would say they had more than 5 years in as an agent, and they were bringing very little to the table as a buyer's agent. I'll just say that. When I look at this process, it's the buyer who, at the end of the day, regardless of anybody else in the, it's the buyer who's buying this property needs to assess what risk they are willing to take. It's not up
Right.
to an agent, it's not up to the home seller, it's not up to the seller's agent, it's not up to your insurance company. At the end of the day, you as the buyer need to understand what your risk is, what your risk tolerance is, and in the case of inspections, how much you want to do and or not do to be able to make it easier for the seller. How much do you want to contribute towards escrow? Is it 2,000? Is it 6,000? What's your risk tolerance in terms of is this property going to close for you? So a lot of it I think comes back to that. People
Yeah.
using agents, I can understand why they want to use agents. However, please don't displace the risk profile onto your agent. That is your responsibility as the buyer. That's my
Right.
feelings.
Yeah. And if I may pick up on that. So, yeah, I agree that there are some really great buyer's agents out there that do add a lot of value. But you have to recognize that with the traditional model of buyer's agency, there's just an inherent misalignment of incentive structure. And that's something that really concerns me about the industry because the buyer's agent only gets paid if you close on a home. And with a percentage based commission structure, the more that you spend, the more that they make. And now, sure, agents will say that, like, well, I don't mind helping my client negotiate $20,000, $30,000 down because 3% of 30 grand isn't that much. But if you come to an agent and your budget is, I'm looking for a property anywhere between 700,000 and $1 million. Well, off the bat, that agent is at least subconsciously motivated to push you towards $1 million property. They're financially incentivized for you to spend more because they only get paid if the deal closes. And because they kind of operate off of volume, the more deals that you can close, the more you're going to make as an agent. They're also financially incentivized to make the process as smooth and quick as possible. And so some of it's ignorance. We'd be silly to pretend that there aren't some bad actors out there where it's like, as a home buyer, the more inspections that you do, the more likelihood that there is that something is going to come up that's going to cause you to walk away from the deal, which from a buyer's agent perspective means, well, we're going back to the drawing board, starting all over, looking at more properties. It means many more months without pay. And that's just human nature. That's not what a buyer's agent wants. They want for you to look at a couple of properties, choose one, have your minimal inspections, and close within 30 days. And I just think that home buyers need to recognize that that dynamic is at play in the traditional model, and to be aware of that. Now, I think, of course, that is a reason not to hire a buyer's agent, because while you're asking them to look out for your best interests, oftentimes them doing so is at the detriment of what's in their financial best interests. And I don't like putting people in those situations, no matter how great of people they are. And that's really then what inspired this model where you were talking about, yeah, it is a big and weighty decision. And so what it's felt like is that you either have an agent that holds your hand through the entire process, or you go at it completely alone. And that's where I just realized, man, there needs to be some door C option where you can have a professional that's closed hundreds of transactions that's able to coach you through it without taking responsibility away from you. You're still the one that's touring the properties. Ultimately, you're responsible for what you put in the offer. As a real estate like coach, I'm not attending inspections or anything with you, but I'm your sounding board to help answer questions and to give you the assurance that, like, yeah, that thing, your fear of not knowing what you don't know, like I can help you in that. Of that, like, I've seen so many of these scenarios. I can tell you, hey, you're good, or hey, you need to look out for this. So trying to create that middle path of where it's like not a complete done for you. You're not completely on your own, but you've got somebody that's in your corner. Now, like any coach, right? I'm not the quarterback. You still got to go out there and make the throw. But I can try and call the play for you and tell you, hey, I've seen this coverage before. This is what you should consider doing.
And I think that's really what people really need out there, right? Because I do coaching myself to help people buy multifamilies, and that's really what they need. They need a sounding board. Am
Yeah.
I doing this right? Am I looking in the right area? Am I doing the right inspections? Am I
Yeah.
offering too much, too little? What if they come back with this? What, right? They just need that sounding board to build their confidence, right? To
Yeah.
build their, I mean, truth be told, I still have people I go to today after doing many, many deals. I still have people I go to and I say, hey, I'm looking at this deal. This is how it's shaping up. Da, da, da. And we just talk about it. And it's just nice to have somebody who's done a lot of deals to be able to have those conversations with. And maybe if something goes sideways in a deal, I have people that I go to that I can talk to. Whereas,
Yep.
like, I just think that builds confidence in somebody to know they have somebody they can go to as a coach, as a mentor to have those conversations. So help me understand in terms of this academy, how does it work for somebody who's interested in learning more and just building their strength in terms of being a home buyer?
Yeah, I love that question. So right now, in terms of the like real estate coaching, I've walked a handful of folks through successful transactions as a real estate coach. Frankly, this is a fairly new transition for me because, like I said, the opportunity to start this real estate coaching business, it's something that I've been thinking about for well over a year now. But it was with the
Yeah.
changes on August 17th, like, okay, this is now a really viable model for people to consider. But with that, it's like I'm creating a category for folks that for 40 years really hasn't existed, of buying a home as a self-represented buyer. And so there's a lot of kind of pre-education that I'm needing to do. And the real estate industry, a National Association of Realtors brokerages, they are not just resistant to change, they are extremely, like, rabidly antagonistic against anybody who's trying to disrupt the
They
industry.
they have pretty big lobbyists. So yeah,
they
you-
they are
be careful
everywhere.
out
It's
there.
yeah, yeah. So
Wear
so
your
and
bulletproof vest, and
yes,
just
I
be
mean,
careful out there,
honestly,
Nick.
it's been one of those things of like of kind of walking this fine line of like, okay, I want to make as much noise about this as I can, but also like I don't want the target to get too big. So anyhow, to answer your question, at this point, I'm trying to give away as much as I possibly can for free that just explains what the home buying process looks like and is just getting the message out of that, hey, it's at least a possibility, and every home buyer, every investor should
Yeah.
consider, is self-representation the right path for me? Do I think that with a bit more education, I have the competence and the capacity to take that on, or is it worth it to me to hire an agent? And that's really the question that I want people to wrestle with. Is having an agent worth it? Don't just make that decision because that's the way that it's always been done. So I've put together a course, and everybody's got a course right now. So I've realized that kind of, oh, here's another guy pitching a course. Well, it's really just the essentials of the home buying process, and that's completely free for anybody to go through. I host that through the school platform. So school.com/DIY homebuyer, DIY homebuyer academy. Folks can sign up for that and go through the course. And for many people, that's going to be enough to give them the confidence that they need to go through and buy a home. And for those folks that are able to do it and are able to do it for free without me charging anything, the only thing that I ask is that you continue to engage in that school community to encourage other people that are considering it. And if it worked for you, leave a bit of a testimonial to just, because again, we're trying to help get the message out that like this is a bona fide option for a legitimate way of purchasing real estate, just as you've explained it, that you've done
Yeah.
yourself. Now, for some folks, though, that course isn't quite going to be enough. Either they've got a unique deal that they're looking at, or they're concerned and they want more of that personal touch. Now, because personal touch is so much more demanding of my time, it's not just like a create it once
For sure.
course that people can take. I do offer a coaching service, and that is just a monthly flat fee where you've got essentially one-on-one unlimited access to me. Shoot me a message anytime you've got a question about something at key points throughout your transaction. We'll hop on a call just like this. If you've got questions about particular property that you've looked at, or want me to help you put together a comparative market analysis, or when we're putting together an offer and you've got questions about the language in the document or what kind of contingencies, I mean, I'm able to give you direct one-on-one guidance through that. And for folks that need that level of service, that can be a really, really valuable, like I said, kind of middle ground
Yeah.
option where you're not doing a full service agent. You're getting coaching at a fraction of the cost of that agent, and then getting the confidence so that you've got somebody that's walked you through the whole deal, so that now on your next deal, all you maybe need to do is just refer back to that essentials course or come back to the DIY homebuyer community with questions
Yeah.
that you've got, and you'll be able to get answers from myself or other users there. So the goal is to provide a ridiculous amount of value absolutely free. And
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a more missionally driven kind of thing, of where I'd love in 20 years or so, when my kids are buying their homes, for self-representation to be a significant percentage of real estate transactions, and for myself to have been kind of a part of that changing tide. So that's the goal and the hope for me.
No, I appreciate you explaining that. I love the, I'll call it the a la carte method. Somebody who's doing this and they say, "Hey, I'm purchasing my first home and I just need some some hourly type service, and a monthly plan may work for them." And that's great. They get their answers quickly from you and some explanation, and great. They get some guidance. Great. That may work for them. But for somebody who's looking to be like, "Hey, I want to be a professional home flipper." and I'm going to be buying a new home every quarter. So
Yep.
that's 4 homes a year. Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to need something more. I'm going to need
Yeah.
more of next time. And so for somebody like that, they need a next level of service because
Yep.
what the first person subscribed to isn't going to cut it. They're going to need more. And so I love the a la carte approach of things. So the other part of what you do that I love is you're actually on the forefront of a changing industry. I chat with a lot of investors, a lot of people in real estate, agents, lenders, different folks. You are on the forefront in terms of take a look at where AI is, artificial intelligence. When there's a blockchain that's being developed and being improved each and every day, like it is, in a way that real estate is going to benefit from it in terms of contracts. If you have a contract for a purchase and sale agreement, or if you have real estate contracts from an attorney, how that can be conducted through the blockchain. You no longer need an agent to facilitate that. The AI on the blockchain is going to facilitate the movement of those documents, the requirement definition of what you as a home buyer, it's not going to come from an agent. It's going to come from artificial intelligence, right? One day you may use this platform that says you put in the data, I'm buying this property, and it's going to spit out what you need to provide. I actually just had another gentleman on the podcast here, and he's doing an AI based lending software program for lenders to be able to use AI to improve their lending process, their lending business. So
Mhm.
AI is coming.
Yep.
And if we can, so to speak, make things easier, and AI will make things easier for a home buyer, and the work you're doing is going to make things easier for a home buyer. I see these trends happening. It's all going in that direction. I actually had a conversation with my nephew the other day. This is a little side story, but I think it's relevant. It's a funny story. I had a conversation with my nephew and I said, "Hey, do you know what a farrier is?" And he's like, "No, I don't know what a farrier is. Like, what is that?" I'm like, "Well, it's a guy who goes around and puts on horseshoes onto horses." So back in the day, if you had a carriage or you had a farm and you did plowing with animals or something, you had to call a farrier probably pretty often to change horseshoes on your horses, on your stock. Well, today, nobody knows what that term is
Right.
because we don't have horses, right? So nobody
Right.
really knows what a farrier is. And so I said, well, fast forward 50 years, because things happen pretty quickly. Look at AI, how fast that's,
Yeah.
snuck up on us. In 50 years, you can ask people, what's a buyer's agent? And they may be like, I have no idea. What's a buyer's agent? And then once you explain it, they will probably say, wow, that sounds so incredibly backwards and so incredibly slow. Right now, we can just go onto a system and we put on the all the information and we close in 5 days.
Yep.
That's where it's going.
Yeah.
I see it. I talk to people who are working in that field, folks like yourself who are doing the education piece, folks that are doing the software piece, implementing AI. It is coming. So I see it for sure. So you're doing good
No,
work,
I'm
Nick.
thanks. Yeah, the parallel that I've used is think back to the early 90s, and it's like the idea of booking a Disneyland vacation. It was in the early 90s. Of course, you're going to use a travel agent to book a big vacation like that. And now it's like travel agent. Wow, they still exist, but they only serve a very small niche of travelers. Everybody's doing it themselves now, and it's just 30-ish years ago that that was like an inconceivable idea. And so I do absolutely think that the tides are changing for the real estate industry. I think that that's going to be a really good thing for consumers. The thing about it and why I'm so bullish on coaching and AI like what you've talked about though is because buying a home for many people is just it's still a highly emotional process. And I think that the best buyers agents, if they're honest, they realize that part of the most valuable part of the service that they provide is really just kind of providing therapy to a buyer through the emotional ups and downs of the process. Now,
Yes.
they're
Yes.
really well compensated therapists at 3% of the purchase price. But I do think that that's an area where AI will continue to struggle with that, like human to human, just
Yeah.
like helping on the emotional side. And so that's where I'd love to ultimately go is like, all right, how do I build this a business with humans in the front, but AI in
Mm,
the back to create the optimal real estate
yeah.
transaction? And I'm excited for what the future holds.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. I'm excited to have had this conversation with you because I think it's really great stuff that you're doing. Seriously, we don't just have anybody on Dirty Boots Capital. We do bring people on who are providing value, supporting the community, doing great things. Not like just like, hey, I'm out there to advertise my business. That's not my goal by hosting these. I really want to bring people forward who are doing like really wild stuff and get the viewers and the listeners to kind of like sit back and think and say, how does this impact me? Or, hey, I'm an agent. Am I going to have a job in 20 years? Or,
Yeah.
hey, I'm a flipper. How can I do flipping more easily? And that's really what we want to do. But for folks who want to learn more about what you do, Nick, and the whole DIY Homebuyer Academy, where can they go to find out more?
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. I so love being on here and being able to connect with you and with your audience. I just think the world of everything that you're doing and the people that are around you. To connect with me, I'm most active on social media. And so you'll find me TikTok, Instagram, and X are kind of the three platforms that I used most, just at DIY Homebuyer, nice and simple. And then I mentioned that school community. That's really the place where I'm centralizing all of the resources that I'm creating. You can find me on YouTube as well. Videos and whatnot go up on there. But if you really want to be able to interact with myself and others that are going through the DIY home buying process, if you want access to that free course that I've created, then look at the DIY homebuyer school group. And then, of course, anybody can reach out to me directly if you've got questions or you want to explore working together more closely in that one-on-one coaching. Just Nick at DIYhomebuyeracademy.com. And I'd love to have a further conversation and just see how I can help you reach your real estate goals.
That's fantastic, Nick. Thank you so much for your time today. Truly appreciate you and everything you're doing. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Tony.